Mr. President.
The Senator from Mississippi.
Mr. President, let me join my dear friend and colleague from New Hampshire in paying tribute to so many things about Johnny Isakson. And Mr. President, I know we're supposed to abide by the rules, address each other, address remarks to the chair and not speak to each other. And if I occasionally look over at the senior senator from Georgia and call him Johnny, I will apologize in advance to the chair and to the keeper of the rules. You know, I think one of the points that Senator Shaheen was making about the bipartisan barbecue dinner, barbecue lunch every year is that we ought to do this more often. We choose up sides so many times, and for those of us on this side of the aisle, it's 3 times at lunch every week. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we don't have a chance. The senior senator from New Hampshire and I never have a chance to have lunch together because we're there with our leadership talking about what our folks are going to do. Johnny Isakson decided that at least one time a year, when he was in charge of making that decision, he would invite Republicans and Democrats. Sometimes we got pushback from the leadership of both parties because they didn't have us captive that particular hour. And some of us who tried it didn't do it year after year after year. Johnny Isakson has done that and been an example of bipartisanship. I hope, Johnny, we're not making you weary of speech making, but I did want to make an extra point that perhaps others haven't made, and give a quotation that Senator Johnny Isakson has made about others that he would never have made about himself because he's too modest. I first became aware of Johnny Isakson in 1990. And he and I had not met at that point, but I was in Atlanta, Georgia for some party function. Johnny Isakson was a successful businessman and a member of the Georgia Senate, and he was a Republican nominee for governor that year, and it was pretty well known he was not going to win that race. But he came before us and made a rip-roaring talk, very impressive, and I said to myself, you know, he may not win this year, but this Johnny Isakson fella has a future, and he's going to go places. And it turns out that the impression I had that day was correct. He would go on to serve for some time in a bipartisan way in Georgia, and then when the Speaker of the House of Representatives resigned from office, Johnny Isakson was there to win the special election, came and became my colleague in the House of Representatives. During that time, when we served in the House together, we were on the deputy whip team together. And Johnny, it was usually you and I sitting next to each other at each of those weekly meetings of the whip team. And I began to realize on a personal, day-to-day basis what an outstanding leader he was, what an articulate leader he was, how persuasive he was, and how able he was to actually come up with some accomplishments in the Congress. Boy, it's hard to get a bill passed. And Johnny Isakson has gotten bill after bill after bill passed for our nation's veterans, of which I'm proud to be one, a list as long as my arms. I'm proud to be a veteran. I'm proud to be the father of an Air Force major and the son of an Army Air Force veteran from World War II, and we all appreciate in our family, down through the generations, the efforts that Johnny has made. He's been so effective because he understands people, because he understands the business about building consensus and using strong relationships and treating each and every one of us on both sides of this center aisle with dignity and respect, the kind of respect that we would hope to be treated with always. Now, Senator Isakson enjoys poetry, as do I. And I've been known to quote a line or two from a poem. But today, I want to quote from a poem entitled Sermons We See by Edgar Guest. And the reason I want to do this is that from time to time, when we have honored people that Johnny Isakson admired, he would cite this poem or a verse or two from it as a way of honoring and pointing out the virtues of the person being honored. He would never be so bold as to quote the poem about himself. And so I submit today for the record, Mr. President, the entire poem, and ask that it be admitted at this moment.
Without objection.
But without objection, I will read the first two verses of Sermons We See by Edgar Guest. I'd rather see a sermon than to hear one any day. I'd rather one should walk with me than merely tell the way. The eye's a better pupil and more willing than the ear. Fine counsel is confusing, but examples always clear. And the best of all the preachers are the men who live their creeds. For to see good put in action is what everybody needs. I soon can learn to do it if you'll let me see it done. I can watch your hands in action, but your tongue too fast may run. And the lecture you deliver may be very wise and true, but I'd rather get my lessons by observing what you do. For I might misunderstand you and the high advice you give, but there's no misunderstanding how you act and how you live. The first two verses of Sermons We See. I am so grateful for the sermons that I've been able to see as a member of the House of Representatives, as a fellow colleague of Johnny Isakson's here in the United States Senate. He has demonstrated in the way he has acted, the way we should always act. He has shown us how to be a gentleman and how to be an accomplished gentleman in the way he has lived, in the way he's worked across the aisle. And how he ends this chapter gives us an opportunity to say thank you for the way he's made the nation better and the way he's made life better for millions and millions of his fellow Americans. Thank you, John. And I yield the floor.